Hello, Gridsters. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, here for another educational series. This one is focused on asset health and the substation workshop that we conducted in 2025. Through the series that we've been doing, it was really centered around the critical actions that are occurring during the present time. The objective of the workshops is to bring in multi-perspectives across various leadership groups. And the one area that is centered to the overall goal of understanding what it takes to change the culture of a utility to conform or execute across an integrated system planning and operation data strategy framework is to understand what is happening within the asset management realm. So the objective of this particular course is really to discuss the idea around what are asset managers overseeing and how do they balance the system performance with understanding asset lifecycle scenarios, such as the cost and/or health. It's also combined with a set of expertise in the engineering and field operations space. So you have your asset management groups that have to integrate with your engineering and field operations teams, understanding the insights to help guide the maintenance, replacement, and overall upgrade of said assets. And then overarching of those three entities is really those that are planning and then ultimately making the decisions of what to execute. So aligning the capital investment and the O&M required to ensure the safe, reliable, affordable grid, while all bringing in the aspect of ensuring the grid is resilient, managing the risk, and ensuring that you're prioritizing your regulatory objections. So as you can tell, those groups are dealing with quite a large set of variables. So how are they effectively pulling this information in and strategically prioritizing all of this type of information to take the next step? One thing about the workshop as a whole, and really a takeaway and a continuous takeaway, is the true power of the collaborative platform. AEIC has a quote, "The knowledge of one is the knowledge of all." Behind that is, the utilities are in essence operating within a geographical footprint that they are allowed to be a monopoly in. But within that monopoly, they're required to be regulated by governing bodies to ensure the cost of service stays within an affordable state, which then grants them the oversight and really the trust to execute the operational needs of said grid. So when you pull in an industry group made up of 20 plus utilities, the ability to understand and share becomes incredibly valuable. And I would say in this workshop itself, seeing how the organizational structures occur and which subject matter expertise exist, this is the bread and butter of the utility space, is having the subject matter experts overseeing families of asset classification, understanding how they all integrate with each other, and then being able to make a holistic plan. But the one thing also that came out of that meeting is you become so focused on the health of the asset and the performance of the particular asset itself that you lose sight of the larger system that they play in. So with the increase of data and the new software tools that are becoming available, it is becoming evident to these experts in the industry that they must understand the whole system holistically, such as what is the planning aspect, what is the current capacity that the grid holds, and for instance, what is being forecasted for future utilization, aka your load forecasting. So that was one large gap that was identified. And so behind that, the big challenge is aging infrastructure meets rising expectations. So when you think about assessing a grid, which is made up of tens of varying different components, all integrated or incorporated into the grid at various timescales, understanding when they are at end of life and how that impacts other pieces of the bigger system becomes quite challenging. And so the big challenge, which I think through all of the buzzwords, the entrenchment that we're in around advancing AI and building out the grid 10 times larger than it ever existed in the next 5 years, it clouds over some of these basic fundamentals that you pull back the curtain, that you're gonna have capital pressure, that the utilities and how they have structured themselves and where they're headed, there are data disparities, and you run into organizational silos. So in essence, we have known for a couple decades that we're up against this issue of aged infrastructure that will require an enormous amount of capital to overhaul. But now, on top of that, there's an expectation to build the grid, as I said, 10 times more in a very short period of time while transforming the aged grid itself. A big discovery, one could say, so shine a little hope, is there are and have been case studies where utilities have been developing software platforms and tactical execution around gathering the disparate data sets, cleansing that data, and putting the data to work. And from these increased data insights is allowing the utilities that have gone and showed value to baseline the performance of the existing grid. And also within that work, it is shareable. So because of the vendor ecosystem that we exist in, there is a desire to share the tools and ultimately the governance that will drive success. So there was equal sharing of multiple projects that have been executed, which we can share through our AEIC membership portal, of active work that can unify the metrics cross departments, that can formulate the data in ways that make it be able to talk to each other. And then last, which is not least, is once you have the data that is organized and cleansed, and you have metrics that have been baselined by current performance without any projected growth or impacts of new advanced technologies, the ability to look at your capital stack and determine your risk for doing or not doing, or delaying or expediting, becomes very visible with an interactive prioritization tool. And so from the workshop, it's the takeaway and the discovery is these tools exist, and there's fundamental work that must be done in regards to your data and your IT infrastructure to be successful. So a takeaway from bringing in a group of subject matter experts in the asset management space, where their sole driver is to understand the assets they own, to ensure that the standardization of their application is reoccurring, and to monitor their health, is at their forefront of what they're to do day to day. What came out of the 2.5-day conference was the realization that what they are all seeking is a space to collect their data, cleanse the data, and integrate it into a way to take actionable steps. And so from that discussion, we've identified 3 pillars of successful data integration. First is standardizing your asset health scoring, which is something that utilities have done for years upon years, but unifying that this exercise is of utmost importance. So across all assets, so your transformers, your breakers, your batteries, and beyond. The other area of success is embracing the digital substation remote monitoring technologies and capabilities that exist. Now, this has been an evolution across the industry over time. We have aged infrastructure. We're mechanically and, let's say, sensed at very limited periods of time, to a point now where we have access to almost near real time through communication networks, an enormous amount of data that could be provided to us. So the goal was identifying that these systems exist to be able to extract data, cleanse data, coordinate it, and place it into a system that is consistent and somewhat not chaotic. Also realizing from this digital substation space and or digital twin discussion is that the GIS, the sensors, and all of the other pieces of the utility that require the overall operation of the power system are a part of the asset management realm. Bringing those groups together to shine the light on the importance of desiloing the silos. And then the last pillar was ensuring the work that was identified through, you have enormous amount of data, you're collecting data, now you're connecting it and bringing insights, is then putting it into a risk-based capital planning tool set. So this is when the value of doing a systematic approach of understanding what risk sits out there from a financial planning and or such as extreme weather and how the varying parts of your grid will be impacted by scenarios outside the utility's control can now be, again, de-siloed and interrogated, which then gives you a very manageable and visible, transparent set of data to then make those very powerful capital and O&M decisions. That because the world that we have created over the last decades, having that information was for naught. But now the information is available and we're starting to see the power of pulling all the data together, putting it inside your risk matrix and being able to discuss and share across multiple teams in near real time with the challenges faced by the varying degrees of elements that are outside the control. So really those three focus points that I laid out is the importance of baselining the health of your assets, the importance of embracing the enormous amount of data that is now available and getting behind that technology and moving it forward as an asset management leader. And then lastly, knowing because you did the due diligence of those other two, that you can put it into a system and start to study the true risk that you sit with and therefore prioritize the capital and O&M. To summarize, after the two-day event, working with these asset management leaders and discussing the importance of their work, as well as how they prioritize and how they would like to see future prioritization occur, the path forward identified was ever apparent in regards to the needs and potential opportunities for not only the utilities themselves to traverse, but the ability of the ecosystem that supports utilities to help enable. So the first one is this idea around innovative planning. So formalizing the language around portfolio level planning frameworks that really link your system planning capacity, forecasts with your asset condition, with your risk, and with your regulatory needs, all in one comprehensive dashboard. Also, the feasibility is available, but then to execute, incorporate scenario modeling, and truthfully, nirvana is real-time capacity planning into your long-term investments. So if you think about what planning is and where the planning world has been, static in the nature of, because of computational power and the robustness of the models, we as an industry have been limited on the amount of scenarios that can be studied and the projections and therefore the outcomes that can be analyzed. However, with the ability of our computational systems today and the enormous amount of insight and real data that we have, we can start to trudge a path forward to tying the impacts of your investment portfolio to the overall real-time capacity of the grid in almost near real time, which changes really the timeline for which you choose and choose not to execute on a certain set of projects. Another need and opportunity that was identified for our path forward is embracing advanced technologies. Expand the use of digital substations, remote sensors, and cloud-based analytic platforms. Also, begin to understand how and what are the steps that are required to deploy AI-based tools. And if you know me, the word AI sometimes triggers a rant or maybe a lecture. To create the platform to unlock artificial intelligence-based tools, there is rudimentary, fundamental work that must exist. Don't lose sight of that, because once that is done, AI-based tools can truly automate forecasting and prioritize high-risk asset segments. Another need and opportunity that was discussed is for utilities to embrace the idea around creative financing. We have created a structure throughout our industry that we are incentivized to build based on our capital spend and our ability to drive out O&M. But if we had the data sets with the right software platforms where we can pencil out internally scenarios such as design value-based investments or performance-based investments, we could then start the discussions with real data-driven insights to change the way that utilities operate. And this also can support where and how the playbook and the information that is being correlated is shared in the governance realm. So help to define varying decision rights and allowing the funding streams based on new information that has not become available because of these systems not being in place. There is a need to really understand the true cost of investing in the grid and how, where and when you invest changes the metrics that utilities are measured by. And so if you put this data in the right systems, under the right guidance, you could start to tell a different story and become creative. And this has come up in almost every workshop, and I think really in our society at this point in time, is workforce development. There is an enormous need, just like the assets are aged, our workforce is aging out. And so there is a need to fill the pipeline of new workers and or skills that were never needed before. So developing the cross-functional training programs to truly equip these teams to understand their peers, and this can be done by, again, having increased access to data-driven insights through the analytics and the systems that we discussed. And also, there's a space where the utilities, the peer utilities, can partner with industry groups to help develop the curriculum, the practices, and really the playbooks that we need to roll out to educate and inform our next generation. It started off with asset management and substation modernization, being that this is the fundamental, as I said before, actions of an electric utility is to maintain the assets. There's a reality that this maintenance of the assets that are aged and must require an overhaul are also facing this enormous demand. It's ever more present that they must understand the system which within each of the individual assets work within, and it's starting to drive an increased conversation around collaboration and really this idea of operational excellence. Grounding themselves in what the current processes are, understanding that there is an enormous amount of data available that can change how they do their work today based on the processes, and then how to interact with the people that will be impacted by these new changes of processes, which then dovetail into, is there creative thought in which assets we deploy next, how we replace the existing assets, and then how do we coordinate and then prioritize the risk that exists within the overall financial needs of the utility to execute. So hopefully that was helpful in regards to thinking about asset management and how they're evolving in this data-driven world.